Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. My name is Felix of Eastwood Fabrication, and in today's video I will primarily be focusing on my review of a variety of resins. Now, with all the new printers that are coming out onto the market, I thought it'd be a pretty good idea to test a collection of resins for comparison. Now, I will be going over some resin that I'm sure that you're already using, but at the same token, I will also present some results of a new resin producing company. Most of the prints that you do see here were printed on the Elegoo Saturn, with the exception of the larger prints that were printed on Piapoli's Phenom L. And one of the things that I'm going to be touching base on is the NFEP that I received from Siraya. Now, a good way to think about this is to compare it as a non-stick cooking pan. This will prevent your prints from sticking onto the FEP and remaining onto your build plate, which worked out tremendously for me. I didn't have any problems whatsoever. One of the other things that I plan on going over is the clear resin and what a good way is to how to mix it and what's considered too much pigment to get the color that you desire. Also, I 3D scanned a couple of things, and the detail that comes out on some of these resins is just phenomenal. One of the things that I plan on going over in my video also is to talk about how safe it is to actually wear a mask, for example, once you've printed it, and what's the best approach to make it so that you can wear it and not worry about inhaling fumes or anything like that. So I'm going to be going over that a little bit and sharing what I have learned. For Halloween, I wore this mask and I printed it on the same day and painted it, and I didn't have any issues whatsoever. So I'm going to be sharing my tips on that as well. So without further ado, I would like to just jump right in and start going over some of the resin. So the very first resin that I'm going to go over here in this review is the Fast Gray resin by Siraya. Now, this is a great all-around resin which covers just about any project that you're going to do. You can do fine detailed work. I really enjoy doing large prints with it in my larger printers. But it really does not matter how you use this. It's still a very good resin. It's easy on the pocketbook. It runs around $30 to $35 on Amazon. I will post a link in my description that will directly take you to this. Siraya website also sell them. They sell the 5K version, which is the jug, and you won't find that on Amazon, just on their website. Another nice thing with the Fast Gray resin by Siraya is that you can mix different resins with it. One being the Tenacious. Now, the Tenacious by Siraya is another resin which is a softer resin. It has a thicker viscosity and it's more of a clear resin. But the benefit of mixing that with the Fast Gray is that if you should drop your model onto the ground, it's not going to, the chances of it shattering into a million pieces are pretty slim, which is a very good benefit. Now, a good ratio to start with is the 80% of the Fast Gray and then 20% of the Tenacious. If you decide that that's not enough, you can mix it a little bit more. Just keep in mind that the Tenacious is about twice the amount as the Fast Gray. And I will have a link for these two as well as all of the resins that I will be going over in this review. Now, the next resin I'm pretty stoked to go over is the Clear Resin version 2 by Siraya. This has been a really fun resin to play with because you can come up with all kinds of different colors depending on what you're looking for. I purchased, and I'll have links for this in the description, but you can purchase pigment to make whatever colors you want. And I use a color wheel to make sure that I get the right shade or the right color. When I wanted to make amber for the Blade Runner blaster, I didn't realize that of the colors that were involved, red and yellow, and I didn't think that there was going to be a red that was required. So this is one that I was testing with first, and it didn't come out the way that I wanted it because it was not flat enough. But one of the things to consider when you're printing with clear and then you use whatever color that you want is if you have any flat surfaces and you've sanded them, the thing to do once you're completely done prepping is to spray it with a clear coat of spray paint, or if you have an airbrush, spray a clear coat, and it'll really bring out that color that was like it was in the bottle. So that's something that will definitely change your life when it comes to printing with color and clear. Something else I want to mention too, and I left this intentionally in the light. All of these bottles of resin are non-see-through. They're obviously they're just so that no UV light of any kind will penetrate them. Otherwise, it'll start to cure it. With the clear resin, that doesn't really happen. I mean, it does. You can see it a little bit. I don't know if you can see that, but I would still recommend using a bottle like this. The reason why I bought these bottles, and these are $1, literally $1 if you've got a Walmart near where you live. The bottles are easier to see when you're mixing, and when you want to mix a lot, then you use the clear bottles, and then when you're done, just put them in another bottle. And believe it or not, you can buy these bottles in different solid colors, so that way it gives you an idea of what color it is that you've mixed. Anyway, so that's super exciting. I'm happy about anything that's clear, that I can control the color of it, and that's the way to go. So on to the next resin review. The next resin for this review is going to be the Smokey Black, which is also a fast resin, and it is by Siraya Tech. This is pretty much a non-brittle resin, just like the fast gray, but again, you can still mix the tenacious with it and not lose too much of its color. This comes out to be a somewhat like a bluish color rather than a black, but it's really a consistent color. So if you have any of your models that say require tinted windows or whatnot, this is a nice consistent a color that you could use, and it's not very it won't damage that much, and it looks really great when you place it under a light source underneath it. It looks really cool. This skull is one of Jeff's at Hex 3D, which turns out really great when you print that model with this resin. So at any rate, this is one of my first clear resins, or clearish type resins, that I played with, that I was really happy with the result on using this resin. Now this tip is going to be directed towards safety and concerns about wearing something that you've printed and wearing it on your face or any part of your skin. Now with the different types of resins, there are different cure times. So one of the things I do want to suggest is to ensure that you've properly cured it thoroughly. Check the specs on the resin that you're using. Also, once you're done, make sure that you're not smelling anything that's coming off of your print. If it's emitting any kind of odor, there's a couple of things that you could do. Try curing it a little bit more. You could also set it outside to get the UV light from the outdoors. If you also, there's another option. I don't have an answer, like a 100% answer for this. I would do some further research. I'm basing this on just my experience. This mask, for example, I've painted the inside as well as the outside. Now on the inside, I'll put things like felt or some sort of soft textured fabric that's going to be touching my face. It helps with wearing it on my face, and if there is any kind of smell, then I'm not going to smell it. And it's not going to be the resin, it's going to be from the paint. But make sure that you, when you do paint your masks or anything of that nature, that you're going to let it cure for the proper amount of time. And usually with spray paint on a rattle can, it's going to, I would give it at least a day or two. If you're using airbrush is different. Most of those paints are acrylic and they don't require any kind of, or they don't give off any kind of smell. So you don't have to worry about that too much. One of the things that I like to do is give it a nice clear coat and just make sure that there's no evidence of it being a print. So with that being said, I would do a little bit more research. If you're unsure, you can easily contact any of the resin companies, Siraya, the new JAMG HE. Most of these companies, they're really good at responding to any questions that you might have, and they even have documentation that will assist you even further with that. So any other questions on that, please don't hesitate to leave a comment in the comment section. If you have any information or even a link that would help with this topic, that would be amazing. Thank you. Next we have the glow-in-the-dark resin by Siraya. This is from their craft line. It's not, last I checked, it wasn't available online. I looked on Amazon, but I will do some more research, and if I find an active link, I'll be sure to put it in the description for you so you can purchase it. But this stuff was pretty fun to play with. I managed to get a couple of prints off, which is really pretty awesome. I even printed some knobs for my DJ controller because I work under a lot of black light when I'm playing music at the club, and I wanted to see if the black light would keep it illuminated. Unfortunately, this resin is like the old school glow in the dark. You have to charge it up under a light, and then when you turn off the light, then it glows and then it starts to diminish. So it's not that kind of glow in the dark, just to give you a heads up. But a good idea would be to, if you wanted to print a bunch of stars or anything and then put them around the light on your ceiling in your room or your kid's room or something, and when you turn off the light, it gives them something to look at on their ceiling other than just those paper stars that you can purchase at the craft store. But this leaves a lot of different options. If you can think of something really cool, this is your resin. So the first resin that I'm going to go over that has to do with Sculpt is by Siraya. Siraya was kind enough to send me a sample of their Sculpt. I have recently discovered Sculpt to be a really great resin. I never really printed with it before. I've always done fast gray or any of the colored ones, but when I got my hands on some Sculpt, it kind of was a game changer for me. Now when it comes to Siraya Sculpt and any other Sculpt is completely different. I noticed that the viscosity of this is super thick. It's almost like pancake syrup. It's just really thick. Now this is a little on the dark side, and I was very happy to give it a shot. I think I used the same settings like I mentioned earlier on all of these prints, and I did the same for the Sculpt by Siraya, and that is the one resin that I printed out of all of these that I think I would change or find a way to fine-tune the settings, unfortunately, because I noticed it took, even after I printed the models with the Sculpt, that seemed that it needed a little bit more cure time. So I think what that translates to is it's going to need a little bit more exposure time during your print. And that can be adjusted in the print settings. So the settings that I provide you for all of these prints, if you're going to use Sculpt and you don't know what settings to use, or you've never used it, I would look that up on Siraya Tech's Facebook group and ask for what settings that you could use and make sure you state which printer that you're using. But this is still a very good Sculpt, and it's easy to work with. I had some other ones like this, and I put them on the sander and I played with them, and I was really impressed with this. And I've never worked with Sculpt before, and I had printed some items that are high detailed, like this raven skull that I had scanned, and then I print them out. And there's a lot of detail in this skull. And if you can see as I'm showing this off, you can get a closer look at it with all of the models that I go over. But it's going to take a little bit more practice for me to figure out what settings to use for that. And if you are able to nail that down, feel free to share your info in the comments. I would like to read up on your experience, and it would help out others that are watching this video as well. Now, I realize that a lot of the resin that I have in this review is presented with Siraya Tech. Now, the review isn't supposed to be simply for Siraya Tech. I wanted to pick a lot of the resins that I have been using and that a lot of the community have been using. I do plan on coming out with additional videos with other resin, because there are a lot of different types of resin, and I would love to try them out. So if you have any suggestions on what other resin you would like me to try before you try it out, please jot them in the comments, and I'll be sure to get that resin so that I can run a test and post my results and go over them with you in the next video. The next resin I would like to go over with you is by Piapoli. Now, when I first purchased my Phenom, my standard Phenom, I purchased a few of these to go with it because this is what was available. I really didn't know a whole lot about resin printing. All I knew was that this is what I needed to have. This is what I was told to get. And Deft resin is a very good resin to use, but it's also really expensive, and you only get this small amount. Prices may vary depending on where you're at and availability. However, I went from this to the Siraya Tech Fast Gray, and I was happy with those results. This does print awesome detail on a non-monochrome screen. The settings are a little bit tricky, but once you dial those in, they're really great. And I'm happy with a lot of the with the results that I still get from them, because from time to time I do require to print something, and I have this, I'm going to use it, because no good resin is wasted. Last and certainly not least, I have 3 bottles of resin that I'm going to go over here by a new company that's on the market. And I can say this, that I'm very impressed by the results that I've gotten from my prints using this resin. The first one's going to be the Conjure Tough. Now the Tough, I have, for example, I've printed, as you can see that I'm showing you closer up, I've printed a couple of items. This Spider-Man works really well. I've actually dropped it on concrete and have not had any problems dropping it at all. It sustained probably just a small scuff on it, and then what I did was I took a little bit of resin out of the bottle and painted it on and went over it with a UV flashlight and then just cleaned it up, and it was as good as new. So there was no cracking. I made sure on all of these prints, not just these, to wait a few weeks to make sure that there was not any cracking over time, because that does happen with some prints, like some of the washable prints. They will tend to crack if you don't cure them correctly. But this one worked extremely well. I tried it on something very detailed like this Valkyrie here, and I haven't had any problems with it. It's not even too brittle when you use the tough. The next one that they have is the rigid. So the rigid, it's very strong, but it's a little on the brittle side, and I noticed when I was pulling the supports off of it, that's how I could tell the difference. Most of the time when I'm taking supports off of the models, I can usually tell which resin I'm using because of the sound and how easily or how difficult it is to take the supports off. And I printed this Spawn model with the rigid, and so when I was pulling it off, it was like the supports were spaghetti in comparison to the others. But the model came out really great. So the rigid, the detail is immaculate. I mean, they're marginal with these resins, but with the rigid, if you want something that's got a lot of detail, like miniatures or something like that, this one, as you can see, it's got some muscular fibers and things like that, or even hair, the rigid is the way to go. And like with all of these resins, I will have a description for you in the, or a link in the description. I'm just gonna leave that in there. The next, or the final resin by the Conjure line. Now, I'm going to pronounce the name of this new company, JAMG HE. He, evidently, the proper pronunciation has an R, like an R at the end of it. So, forgive me if I'm butchering the name, but the thing that I'm not going to butcher is my review on the resin itself, because I'm very happy with it. Now, this is another Sculpt, and I'm very happy with the Sculpt. The viscosity is different from the Siraya Tech Sculpt. It's not that thick at all. And when I'm done with my prints using this Sculpt, it comes out baby smooth. The supports don't come off like with difficulty at all. They come off with ease. And again, that really depends on how your settings, your support settings are. If they're going in too deep, if they're too big, that really depends on you. But again, I'm going to go ahead and make sure to support you with my support settings that you can start with. And then you can go from there. Now, for example, this Skull of Skulls that I printed, which is done by Hex 3D, you can see the difference. I wish that I could just have you touch it, because it's very soft, and when it comes to working with it, I had some other parts that I had to sand, and they were flat, and I just wanted to sand them to see how they would come out, and it was soft as a baby's skin. It's extremely soft, but it's not too scratchable, and it's easy to paint. The Raven skull that I printed with the Siraya Tech, and then I printed it with the Conjure Sculpt. I was extremely happy with the detail. I didn't have any problems at all whatsoever. Very happy with that. Now, one of the last things I wanted to go over with regards to the Conjure resin is not the resin itself, it's the packaging. The bottles itself, they're made out of metal or a tin of some sort, and it's a very nice looking bottle, and it holds the resin like it's supposed to. But the only thing that I don't really care for is the way that when you take the lid off. And as you can see here, I'm showing you where when you take off the lid, and then you have to pull this tab, and you really have to kind of work at it to get the tab off. the insert, and then sometimes when you pull it off, the little rubber seal comes off. But the first time that I attempted to open this up, I nearly got it in my eye. It was actually, when I finally pulled it out, a drop came near my eye. So from now on, I'm resorting to using the handle of this paintbrush, as you can see here, and it's the safest way because it pulls it out slowly. So the makers, JAMG HE, if you're listening, maybe if you can bottle it differently, that would be great. And this way also with the plastic bottles, you'll be able to cut them in half and expose what's left over in there, and put it under a UV light or stick it outside or something, so that way it's easier to recycle or dispose of, however you dispose of used resin bottles. But the top is the only concern I have. Other than that, I have no other complaints at all. It's just if I had one, I would want to mention that because it is a little bit of a concern. So if you buy this resin, make sure that you wear eye protection and get yourself a little handy paintbrush handle or a screwdriver or whatnot and remove it slowly in that manner, then you won't have any potential accidents. So now onward towards settings. So as promised, I'm going to provide you with the settings that I used for all of the prints in this review. Now for the smaller prints, I used my Elegoo Saturn, and that does have the monochrome screen for the ones that aren't familiar with this printer. Now these are the settings that I used for all of them. Now every print came out immaculate with the exception of the Siraya Sculpt. Now this is a thicker resin. It's going to require a little bit more tweaking, but at least you have a base to start with. Now when I contacted Siraya, one of the things that they did tell me was that if you heat up the resin a little bit more than the 32 Celsius, the viscosity would change to a more thinner resin once you start printing. So one of the other options that I recommend is to visit their Facebook group. Siraya really good at responding to questions like that. And they also have a chart which you can refer to. It's just a spreadsheet which includes all the different types of printers and all the times that would help you with that particular resin. Also, I used my Phenom L to print some of the larger prints here, and I'm going to go ahead and provide settings for that. If you're having difficulty using your Phenom L, then this will get you started. I haven't had any problems with these settings, especially when it comes to detail using any of these resins. Also, I would like to provide some settings that I use for my supports. Now, I use both CheetahBox Pro and version 1.8.1. I can't say that I've ever used Lychee, so I don't have any kind of recommendations or tips regarding that slicer. But with CheetahBox, and I suppose you could use the same settings with Lychee, I'm uncertain. But these are my settings. Now these are just my starter settings, and then what I go ahead and I do, depending on the model, like for example, the teeth on this Coyote, you'll want to thin it up when you get to tips of things, like fingertips or feathers or anything of that nature, and that will help you fine-tune your settings for the supports as you're supporting it. I never use the all or automatic supports because I miss out on the knowledge of why a support goes where it goes. And I do have a video that I did, a live video for supporting. It's a little outdated, but not too much, but at least it'll give you a little heads up, and maybe you'll learn something that you've never done before with that video. And in the future, I do plan on providing another video or having another live video, so that way people can ask questions right on the spot and I'll be able to help them. So these are my settings. These are the top, mids, and the bottoms. I don't ever use a raft because I don't use FDM printing. Some people prefer to use rafts, and I have never had to use one. So it's totally personal preference. So one of the questions that I get asked a lot of is about ventilation and how to rid of the smell of resin when you're printing. There's many ways to go about answering this question. When you heat up your resin to 32 Celsius, I believe it is, it's going to create a stronger smell of the resin than what you get when you open the bottle. Now, these resins, I would not recommend not having any protection. Respirator. I wear a respirator no matter what. So some of them may not smell as bad as the others, but to just kind of like be on the safe side, I recommend wearing a respirator. And especially when you're heating up resin for printing, it's gonna create a stronger smell. So what I have done for at least one of my printers that I use the heater on is my Phenom L. And I will link in the description where I got the heater. It's made specifically for the Phenom. And when that heater is going, inside that box I've got inlet fans, I've got a fan that sucks the air out of the top, and then it goes right into a carbon filter, and therefore there's no smell at all. But if you're printing, if you just own a Saturn and you don't necessarily want to print a box, Elegoo does make these, I call them miniature air filters. And they do have a filter inside here. You just take this top off and you can replace the filter. They're rechargeable, but if you've got like a 10-hour print or something like that, I don't think they're gonna last the whole time. That's the only drawback with this. But some ventilation or purification is better than none. I think it would be best if you were able to plug this in and be able to have it constantly plugged in. That way it never runs out of charge. I have yet to try that, but I'm pretty sure that that's possible with this. And I just have 4 of them, and I place one on each corner, and even though I don't smell anything anyway, it's nice to know that I have those there, because there are toxins in the air that you cannot smell. So there is that. If you have any other questions, or if you have any suggestions regarding that topic of ventilation, please don't be shy or hesitate. Jot those down in the comments for us. Thanks again for tuning in. I hope that this video has provided with some assistance with regards to you choosing the right resin for your project. If you have any other questions, please jot them down in the comment section. Also, if you have any other suggestions or you want to share any of your knowledge from what you've experienced, it would help out everybody else who's viewing this video, including myself, to jot those down. Now, if you see any links that are in the description that will lead you towards any of the resins that I've reviewed here, those are affiliate links, and it will help out the channel here. And so I very much appreciate it if you would use those links. That goes towards also CheetahBox. So I'm going to leave a link down there. So if you decide to go with CheetahBox Pro, use that link, and that'll help out this channel a lot. Now realize that it's been a bit since I've come out with a video, and I promise to not let it go so long next time, because I do have a whole lot of other things to create videos for, different topics with regarding to the printing, 3D printing world. So again, thank you so much, and I hope to see you next time. Take care. Hello. Jesus fucking